Hello, everybody, and welcome to the series 2 of Pipeline Pioneers, where we learn from the practitioners, the experts as to how to build the pipelines. On the show, we bring in the leaders, we bring in individual contributors, because you learn from everybody. So today, I'm excited to have Cole. Cole just joined a new company. So Cole, welcome to the show.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Super excited to be here. A little bit about me. I come from a founding account executive background, first at Rattle, where we had our Series A at 26 million, had a couple of years there, and then I would go on to be a founding account executive at Cinch. From those kind of skill sets, I've joined Unify, which is a all-in-one warm outbound tool that does everything from mailbox warming to enrichment to sales engagement. Very excited to be here, excited to be speaking with you, and excited to see you again.
That's awesome, man. So, Cole, you have been the founding account executive for a couple of companies now. When you're a founding account executive, you are building pipeline, you're closing deals, right? As the companies mature, account executives, tend to focus less on the pipeline generation. What's your take? Should account executives continue to build their pipeline? What % of pipeline should come from account executives versus, them relying on PDR or marketing?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So my general hunch or my take is that 30 to 40% of pipelines should still come from account executives. But I think I have a bit of a biased view, given that a lot of times in these founding account executive roles where, budgets are a bit more thin, headcount is a little bit lower, you're still focused and responsible for building your own pipeline, right? At some of these organizations, I didn't have my own SDR. And so it's really, that's kind of the main factor there. I think if you're at a larger organization where maybe you're doing enterprise level deals, $100,000 contracts, you may have a couple SDRs and maybe that percentage goes down a little bit. But my hunch is early roles, call it Series A, Series B, where you don't have a huge team, maybe a huge marketing budget. You want to be the first touch to some of those close one opportunities. And I think that in general, if you are doing your own pipeline, you're holding your own conversations, it's just going to increase your odds of winning that particular deal.
This is great. Let's talk about AI.
Yeah.
By the way, I couldn't agree more with you. I believe in the full cycle sales, where you touch the prospect, especially in the early stages of the company. You touch the prospect, you take them along the journey, you close them, and then stay in touch with them, right? Even though we have CS and AM organization, but stay in touch with the customers. So couldn't agree more with you. Talk to me about your use of AI in your role as an account executive, and now you're the growth specialist here at Unify. What are you hearing about AI? What tools are you using? And touch upon which stages of the pipeline generation do you think AI tools can be used the most?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think AI can be used across all, prospects or all stages of the funnel. I think AI, generally how I view it is how do we, 2x, 3x, and 4x the wingspan of a typical AE or a typical rep, right? So whether it's using smart snippets, something that we have at Unify to create really creative messaging to, a specific persona or specific ICP, whether it's using agents at the top of funnel to, for example, qualify website visitors. Let's say you have 100 companies that come on your website, and I want to know just the specific ones that have had, fundraising in the last 6 months. What are the companies that use Salesforce? What are the companies that have had mentioned, negative customer sentiment because we offer a product that, helps with reviews. And so I think at the top of funnel, it's super, super helpful. But I think at the end of the funnel, it can be great. You look at a platform like Gong to analyze call transcripts, right? And to understand where are the gaps in my pipeline, and am I multi-threaded enough? Am I, wide enough and deep enough in account to, get this across the finish line? And so I think from, that first call, that first inbound all the way through close one, I think AI is super helpful. In terms of tools that I use, ChatGPT, Perplexity, we use Unify internally. There's a number of them out there. You can look at Lavender in terms of writing really polished emails, making sure that you're not using too many words, making sure you're not using too fluffy of language, making sure you're being super direct to your prospects. That's kind of goes back to, you have to have a really good understanding of your ICP.
No, this is great. So you touched on ICP. ICP gets defined, some companies do beginning of the year, some companies, they iterate on it. What's your take on ICP? When should you define it? How often should you define it? And as a receiver, of ICP as account executives, what kind of input do you give the leadership team?
Yeah, a couple of things there. I think you should define it as much as you need to, but not like overspin the wheel, right? And so I think you should have a seamless handoff between sales, marketing, and leadership. I mean, ultimately, right, if you have the wrong ICP, you're going to be spending a lot of resources in the wrong area. One, from like a subjective time, angle, right? You have reps spending too much time going after the wrong accounts. And then you have from like a resource angle of like monetary, right? So we're spending a bunch of marketing budgets on, accounts and prospects and industries that just aren't relevant. You're not hitting the right person with the right content, at the right company. And so I think to iterate on that as quickly as possible is always important. And then, the reps are boots on the ground, right? So, when I'm booking, pipeline and I'm having those early, stage 1, stage 2, stage 3 conversations, I should be giving that feedback and having that feedback loop super small to leadership to say, hey, these conversations or these intro meetings, like they're not going well for X, Y, and Z. Maybe it's due to product limitations, or maybe it's due to, right, it's not the right time for the account, or maybe this person, right, just isn't relevant and isn't our buyer. And so within the ICP, you have the kind of the right persona. And right, there's a book by Skip Miller, like above the line, below the line selling. So like, are we hitting the below the line people, like the end users with like above the line messaging, right? Are we reaching out to C-suites with messaging that's just not quite direct enough, right? And so, right, you have ICP on like kind of a persona level. And then you have the company specifics, and like we could talk for hours on that, right? But you have, companies like Rattle, where I was, like Technographics, right? So we could only sell to shops with Salesforce and Slack, right? And so if I'm reaching out to a bunch of companies that are on HubSpot, well, I'm really, really wasting my time, right? And so like there's a number of different categories within ICP that are super, super relevant. But ultimately, like you don't want to be, wasting your resources going after the wrong accounts. If you're going after the right ICP, you can enable more hyper-personalized messaging, which just helps with the sales and marketing alignment. And then ultimately, like the whole goal is to accelerate sales cycles, right? So if you're reaching out to the right people at the right company, you have a good narrative of the problem that you're solving within the market, right? You're going to be driving win rates, you're going to be driving sales cycles, and like, who doesn't like to see that?
Last question, Cole, how do you see the whole pipeline generation is changing, right? What used to work in 2020 is no longer working in 2025. The whole playbook is changing. Which channels are driving the pipeline the most?
Great question. I think it's very specific to the industry. I can speak to Unify in particular. I'd say LinkedIn drives about 22% of our pipeline. And so it really is dependent on where your ICP lives. If you're selling to truckers in Illinois, you're probably not going to be living on LinkedIn. You might be making some cold calls. You might live on email. Yep. I think in general, if you are surfacing the right problem to the right people, the channel will work, right? And so if you're emailing with hyper relevant messaging to someone who cares about the problem that you're solving and you're creating some personalization, like I think that channel is still effective. And so, it's just dependent on the industry a little bit. For us, yeah, we see LinkedIn and email and cold call all be effective, but we're in B2B SaaS. And so I think we're a little bit siloed, probably similar to you guys as well.
Let me give you an interactive game here. I'm going to give you 100 pennies, right? If it were to you, how would you invest these 100 pennies? Your goal is to generate a pipeline.
Yeah, the 100 pennies game. I love it.
100 pennies game. Here we go. You're familiar with it, right? So
yeah, of course.
Pennies, there are all these channels. Your goal is to generate the pipeline, right? That ultimately converts to revenue. How would you invest? Or, you're pretty early at Unify, but how would you advise them to invest these pennies?
Yeah, I love this game. So I think for us in particular, I can't speak to other companies. Where we've seen a lot of success is on LinkedIn, but in particular, the founder-led growth. Yep. And so I would probably allocate 20% to that. I think Austin and Connor are, on the right side, I guess social too.
You're both, you're social and founder.
Yeah, exactly. I think writing really polished, relevant information on LinkedIn to people who care about the problem you're trying to solve creates an interesting connection. And I think we do it really well. I would say, secondly, community. That's something that we're actively trying to do a lot more of now, just in terms of, being in San Francisco, being in New York, demonstrating the type of company that we are, the type of DNA that we have here. Yeah, I would say one penny would be good.
Yep.
I would say otherwise product-led growth, I would say is maybe 2 pennies as well.
Yep.
this is something that when we were growing quite quickly last year, we really started to move up market, and now we've built a product that is like more enterprise and, you know, commercial focused. And so now how do we think about really enabling the growth segment? And so I would say product-led growth.
Sure.
I would say finally, I would say probably marketing channels. I would say we'll give those 2 pennies.
Yep.
Obviously you want to be aligned with sales and marketing. And then I would say finally is partnership. You know, partnership is a huge thing that we focus on, especially from like an agency perspective, being in the go-to-market space. You know, how do we, you know, leverage like Clay type agencies where we can, you know, do some marketing that way.
Oh no, this is great. It's great. So, you know, I'm a little surprised that if I look at this chart again, I don't see any investment in sales. So unpack it for me. You know, coming from a AE background, and you don't have anything in sales, what led you to distribute your pennies this way?
Yeah, I think we've already really doubled the sales team in the past, call it 3 to 4 months. And so I just don't think that that's an area that we're focused on. But I also think that, and you're probably aware, if you look at like the Cursors of the world or the Pylons of the world, or some of these new generational AI companies, they're proving that the go-to-market teams in terms of reps can actually be a significant bit smaller and then focus some of the budget elsewhere, right? So that's back to the AI piece. How do we take like 3 or 4 of our really star reps, enable them with AI, and then triple and quadruple their wingspan to really bring in business? And I think true in terms of like where we focus is like really on customer success. I would say doubling down on customer success, retention, and focus on providing like a really, really delightful experience with the product is something that, you know, we would focus on even more than like sales-led growth right now.
That's awesome. Well, let's take a look at what your peers are saying. Where are they investing? So this is your peer group, right? That's investing. And when I overlay your investment here, you know, few things are kind of different here. You have no investment in sales or in events. What else jumps out here?
Yeah, I would say, as mentioned, I think customer-led is something, you know, having really, really good customers and focus on retention is going to provide like an evangelist effect. And so maybe could have put a couple pennies there. Event-led is like a little interesting because like I put in community. And so I think some of these buckets are like a little bit similar. Like,
got you.
Yeah, like I think community is a situation where we would have events, we would want to do happy hours, we would want to have hackathons, we would want to do interesting things to bring in interesting people into the community. I would say founder-led looks like I'm more than double, but I think that's just because of the stage of the company we're at. You know, I think as you move more up market, it becomes a little bit less important, and it becomes more like, you know, you look at a Zoom Info and Henry, right? You have like more of a bigger community, but even him, you see him like leading by a lot of founder-led presence. And I think that's something that's super important.
Yeah. Well, Cole, thank you so much for joining us. A delight here to share, you know, first-hand experiences from you know, the practitioners here. So thank you. I'm sure our community is going to appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate you having me on, and it's really great to see your face again.